I've been driving trucks through Appalachia for 19 years now. Started when I was 23, fresh out of a failed marriage and looking for something that would keep me moving, keep me from thinking too much. The mountains became my home in a way no building ever was. I learned every curve, every grade, every stretch where black ice likes to form in winter and where fog settles thick enough to choke on in autumn. I've seen things out there that I can't explain. Lights moving through the trees where no roads exist, shadows that don't match anything casting them, sounds that carry through the hollows like voices from another time. Most truckers who run these routes long enough have stories. We share them at truck stops over bad coffee, half laughing to keep from admitting how much they still bother us. But there's one story I don't tell, not anymore. Because the way people look at me when I do, like I've lost my mind or like they're suddenly afraid to be near me, it's not worth it. But it happened. I know it happened, and I'll carry it with me until the day I die. It was November of 2017, and I was running a load of building supplies from Charlotte up to Columbus. Standard route, one I'd done probably 200 times over the years. I was behind schedule because of a loading delay in North Carolina, and my dispatcher was on my case about making up time. I should have stopped for the night in Princeton, maybe found a truck stop and caught a few hours of sleep. But I was stubborn back then. Thought I could push through anything. So I kept driving, even as the fog started rolling in around Beckley, West Virginia. If you've never driven through Appalachian fog, you can't understand what it's like. It's not like fog anywhere else. It comes up from the hollows and wraps around the mountains like something alive, like it's trying to swallow the road whole. Your headlights don't cut through it, they just bounce back at you, turning everything into a wall of white. You can't see more than 20 feet ahead, sometimes less. The smart thing to do is pull over and wait it out. But I wasn't feeling smart that night. I was feeling tired and irritated and determined to make up the hours I'd lost. Route 19 winds through some of the loneliest stretches of country you'll ever see. Even in daylight, there's something heavy about that road, the way the trees press in from both sides, the way the mountains loom above you like they're watching. At night, in the fog, it feels like driving through a void, like you're the last person left on Earth and the darkness is just waiting for you to stop. I had the radio on, some late-night AM station playing old country songs, but the signal kept cutting in and out. Static would fill the cab for minutes at a time, and I'd find myself holding my breath, waiting for the music to come back just so I wouldn't feel so alone. My CB was quiet too. Usually there's chatter on Channel 19, other truckers calling out conditions or just shooting the breeze to stay awake. But that night, nothing. Just dead air and the sound of my engine and the fog pressing against my windshield like it wanted in. It was just past 2 in the morning when I saw her. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. You see things when you're tired, especially in conditions like that. Shapes in the fog that turn out to be nothing. But this shape didn't disappear. As I got closer, it resolved into a figure standing on the shoulder of the road. A woman. She was wearing a pale blue dress, the kind you might wear to church on Easter Sunday, completely wrong for a cold November night on a mountain road. And she was waving. Not frantically, not like someone in a panic. Just a slow, steady wave, like she'd been waiting for me. I should have kept driving. That thought has lived in my head every day since. I should have kept driving, but I couldn't. Nobody should be out there alone at that hour, dressed like that, in that weather. If I'd passed her by and found out later that something had happened to her, I wouldn't have been able to live with myself. So I downshifted and started pulling onto the shoulder, my air brakes hissing in the silence. I rolled down my window as she approached. The fog swirled around her, and for a moment, I couldn't make out her face clearly. Then she stepped closer, and I saw her. She was young, mid-20s, maybe. Pretty, with dark hair that hung wet against her shoulders, like she'd been out in the damp for hours. Her skin was pale, almost gray in the dim light from my cab. But her eyes were what I remember most. They were dark and deep and tired, like she hadn't slept in years, like she'd seen things that had worn her down to nothing. "Car broke down," she said. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, and I had to lean closer to hear her over the idle of my engine. "Could you give me a ride to the next town?" I hesitated. Company policy says no hitchhikers, and for good reason. You never know who you're picking up out there, but looking at her shivering in that thin dress, alone on that empty road, I couldn't say no. I told myself it was the right thing to do, the human thing. "Yeah, all right," I said. "Climb on in." She walked around to the passenger side, and I reached over to push the door open for her. She climbed up into the cab with a strange kind of grace, like she'd done it before, like she knew exactly how to navigate the steps in the seat. She settled in next to me and folded her hands in her lap, looking straight ahead through the windshield. She didn't put on a seatbelt. I noticed that, but didn't say anything. Some people don't like being told what to do. I pulled back onto the road and started driving. The fog was still thick, and I had to focus on the center line to keep from drifting. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was heavy, present, like there was something in the cab with us besides just the two of us. "Bad night to be out," I said, trying to make conversation. "What happened to your car?" "It stopped," she said. That was it. 2 words. She didn't elaborate, didn't explain, just kept staring straight ahead. I tried again. "You from around here?" "Yes." "Where you headed? I can drop you at a gas station maybe, or a diner if there's one open." "The next town is fine." Her voice was flat, emotionless. Not rude, exactly, but empty. Like she was going through the motions of conversation without actually being present for it. I told myself she was probably in shock. Being stranded on a road like that in the middle of the night would shake anyone up. I decided to give her space, let her talk if she wanted to, stay quiet if she didn't. We drove in silence for another few minutes. The fog seemed to be getting thicker, if that was possible. I could barely see the road ahead, and I slowed down even more, creeping along at maybe 30 miles an hour. The trees on either side of the road were invisible, swallowed by the white. It felt like we were driving through nothing, through nowhere, through some place that didn't exist on any map. I glanced over at her, just a quick look to make sure she was okay. She was still staring straight ahead, but something about her had changed. Her skin looked even paler than before, almost translucent, and she was completely still. No fidgeting, no shifting in her seat, no signs of breathing that I could see. A cold feeling started creeping up my spine, and I told myself I was imagining things. Just tired, just spooked by the fog and the silence and the strangeness of the situation. "So," I said, my voice louder than I intended, "what's your name?" She didn't answer, didn't even acknowledge that I'd spoken. "Miss, you okay?" Nothing. I looked over at her again, longer this time, and that's when I realized something was wrong, really wrong. She wasn't just still, she was frozen, like a photograph, like a mannequin. Her eyes were open, but they weren't moving, weren't blinking. The cold feeling in my spine spread through my whole body. "Hey," I said, reaching over to touch her shoulder. My hand went through her, not through like she was a ghost in some movie, not through with some kind of special effect or glow. It just passed through the space where she should have been and came out the other side, like she wasn't there, like she'd never been there. I screamed. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I screamed like I've never screamed in my life, and I hit the brakes so hard that my trailer started to swing. I fought the wheel, trying to keep from jackknifing, and somehow managed to bring the rig to a stop on the shoulder. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My hands were shaking. I looked over at the passenger seat. It was empty. The door was still closed. The window was still up. There was no way she could have gotten out without me seeing or hearing. But she was gone. The seat looked like it had never been occupied, no impression in the cushion, no warmth, nothing. Just empty space where a woman had been sitting moments before. I sat there for what felt like an hour, trying to catch my breath, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Eventually, I got out of the cab and walked around the entire truck with my flashlight, checking every inch, looking under the trailer, looking in the sleeper, looking everywhere a person could possibly hide. There was no one. I was alone on that road, alone in the fog, alone with whatever had just happened to me. I didn't sleep that night. I drove straight through to the next town, a little place called Oak Hill, and pulled into the first diner I saw. It was one of those 24-hour places, mostly empty at that hour, except for a couple of other truckers and a waitress who looked like she'd been working there since the Eisenhower administration. I sat down at the counter and ordered coffee, even though my hands were still shaking too badly to hold the cup steady. The waitress noticed. She was an older woman, maybe 65 or 70, with gray hair pulled back in a bun and eyes that had seen too much of life to be surprised by anything. She looked at me for a long moment, then set down the coffee pot. "You see something out there tonight, honey?" I looked up at her, not sure how to answer, not sure if I should answer. but something in her face told me she'd understand, that she wouldn't think I was crazy. "A woman," I said. "On Route 19. She asked for a ride and I picked her up. And then she just vanished. Right out of my cab. She was there, and then she wasn't." The waitress went pale. Not surprise pale, like she'd been afraid of hearing those exact words. She turned around and walked to a bulletin board on the wall behind the counter, the kind where people post flyers for lost dogs and community events. She pulled something down and brought it back to me. It was a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age, protected by a plastic sleeve. The headline read, "Local woman dies in Route 19 accident." Below it was a photograph. The woman in the picture was wearing a pale blue dress. She had dark hair and dark eyes, and the same tired, worn-down expression I'd seen in my cab. It was her. There was no doubt in my mind. It was the same woman. Her name was Caroline Marsh, the waitress said quietly. She died on Route 19 inches, 1987. Car accident in the fog. They say she was trying to flag down help when another vehicle hit her. She was 24 years old. I stared at the clipping, unable to speak. The date on the article was the 15th of November, 1987. I looked at my phone to check the current date, the 15th of November, 2017, exactly 30 years. "You're not the first," the waitress continued. "Every few years, someone comes in here with the same story. Always on this night, always on that stretch of road. They pick her up, and she disappears. No one knows why she's still out there. Maybe she doesn't know she's dead. Maybe she's looking for something. Or someone." She paused, looking at me with something like pity. "Or maybe she just doesn't want to be alone." I left the diner as soon as the sun came up. I finished my delivery to Columbus, turned in my paperwork, and told my dispatcher I needed a few days off. I spent those days in a motel room, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that what happened was a dream, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and fog and too many hours behind the wheel. But I knew it wasn't. I knew what I'd seen, what I'd felt when my hand passed through empty air where a woman should have been. I still drive trucks. It's the only life I know, and I'm too old to start over now. But I don't take Route 19 anymore. Ever. I don't care if it adds 2 hours to my trip. I don't care if my dispatcher complains or if I lose money on fuel. There's no amount of money in the world that would get me back on that road. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm running through the mountains and the fog starts rolling in, I think about Caroline Marsh. I think about her standing on that shoulder in her pale blue dress, waving down strangers, climbing into their cabs, vanishing before they can get her where she needs to go. I wonder if she knows what she is. I wonder if she remembers dying. I wonder if she's scared, out there in the dark, reliving the same night over and over again for 30 years, for 40, forever. And I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't looked over, if I just kept my eyes on the road and driven until I reached the next town. Would she have stayed? Would she have spoken? Would she have told me what she was looking for, what she needed to finally rest? I'll never know. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to. Some things in these mountains don't have answers. Some things just are old and strange and sad, hanging on long after they should have faded away. Caroline Marsh is one of them. And every November 15th, no matter where I am, I light a candle and say a prayer for a woman I never really knew. A woman who asked me for help on a foggy night and then disappeared before I could give it. I hope she finds peace someday. I hope whatever's keeping her on that road finally lets her go. But until then, she's out there, waiting in the fog, waving down the next driver. And if you ever find yourself on Route 19 outside Beckley on a cold November night, and you see a woman in a pale blue dress on the shoulder of the road, keep driving. Just keep driving. I've been hauling freight for over 20 years now, mostly running routes through the mid-Atlantic and down into the heart of Appalachia. You spend enough time on these roads, you start to feel like you know them better than you know your own home. Every curve, every grade, every stretch where the mountains press in close and the radio signals fade to static. I've driven through blizzards that turn the world white. I've pushed through fog so thick I couldn't see the hood of my own truck. I've been alone on roads at 3 in the morning when it feels like you're the last person left alive on Earth. You get used to the loneliness. You get used to the strange sounds and the tricks your mind plays when you're tired. But you never get used to the things that can't be explained, the things that happen out there in the dark that don't follow any rules you understand. This happened in the fall of 2019, late October. The leaves had already turned and started falling, and there was that particular smell in the air that only comes during autumn in the mountains, wood smoke and decay, and something else, something older. I'd just dropped a load of furniture in Roanoke, Virginia, and I was deadheading back to my home terminal in Lexington, Kentucky. Deadheading means running empty, no cargo, just trying to get home or to your next pickup. It's the loneliest kind of driving there is. No purpose except to cover miles. No weight behind you, except the empty trailer rattling along. I was on Route 460, heading west through the mountains. If you've never driven that stretch, it's beautiful in the daylight, rolling hills, small towns that look frozen in time, the kind of scenery that makes you understand why people settled here generations ago and never left. But at night, it's different. The beauty turns into something else. The mountains become walls. The hollows become pits of darkness that your headlights can't penetrate. The small towns go dark and silent, and you start to feel like you're driving through a place that doesn't want you there. It was around 11:30 at night when I first heard it, a knocking sound coming from somewhere behind me. At first, I didn't think anything of it. When you're pulling an empty trailer, you hear all kinds of noises. The walls flex and pop with temperature changes. Loose straps rattle. Road vibrations make things shift, even when there's nothing to shift. I figured it was just the trailer settling, maybe a piece of debris I'd picked up somewhere along the way banging around. But then I started paying attention to the rhythm. 3 knocks, then a pause. 3 knocks, then a pause. Over and over, perfectly spaced, like someone keeping time. That's when the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Road noise isn't rhythmic. Debris doesn't knock in patterns. Something was making that sound deliberately. I turned down my radio and listened. The knocking continued, faint but unmistakable. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. It was coming from the trailer, from inside the trailer that I knew for a fact was empty, because I'd watched them unload it myself in Roanoke. I'd closed those doors and sealed them and checked the locks before I pulled out. There was nothing in there. There couldn't be anything in there. I told myself I was imagining things. Told myself it was just some weird acoustic trick, some echo from the road or the mountains or my own exhausted brain. I'd been driving for 14 hours at that point, running on truck stop coffee and vending machine sandwiches. Your mind does strange things when you're that tired. It fills in patterns where there aren't any. It makes you hear things that aren't there. But the knocking didn't stop. If anything, it got louder as the miles passed, more insistent, like whatever was making it knew I was listening and wanted to make sure I kept listening. I decided to pull over and check. There was a rest area coming up near Tazewell County, just a small pull-off with a couple of parking spots and a brick building with restrooms. Not much, but it was something. Better than stopping on the shoulder of a dark mountain road with nothing around for miles. I took the exit and pulled into the lot. There was one other vehicle there, an old pickup truck parked at the far end, but no sign of whoever owned it. The lights in the restroom building were on, casting a weak yellow glow across the pavement. I grabbed my flashlight from behind the seat and climbed down from the cab. The night air was cold, that sharp October cold that cuts right through your jacket and settles in your bones. The mountains rose up on all sides, black shapes against a slightly less black sky. There was no moon, and the stars were hidden behind a layer of clouds. The only sound was the ticking of my engine cooling down and the distant rush of water from somewhere in the hollow below. I walked back to the trailer, shining my flashlight along the sides, checking for anything unusual. The aluminum walls reflected the light back at me, showing nothing but road grime and the usual wear. I checked the locks on the rear doors. Still sealed, exactly as I'd left them. I crouched down and shined the light underneath the trailer, looking for anything that might have gotten caught up in the undercarriage. Nothing, just pavement and shadows. I stood there for a long moment, listening. The knocking had stopped the moment I'd pulled into the rest area. Everything was silent now, so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I told myself I'd been imagining it. Just road fatigue, just my mind playing tricks. I walked back to the cab, climbed in, and pulled back onto the highway. Within 5 minutes, the knocking started again. This time it was louder, much louder. Not faint taps anymore, but solid, heavy thuds that I could feel through the frame of the truck. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. The rhythm was exactly the same, but the intensity had increased. It sounded like someone pounding on the inside of the trailer walls. Someone who wanted out. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I'm not ashamed to admit that. 20 years of driving, and I'd never experienced anything like this. I picked up my CB and called out on Channel 19, asking if there was anyone else on the road, anyone who could see my trailer, anyone who could tell me if something was wrong. Static. Nothing but static. I tried my cell phone next, thinking I'd call my dispatcher, get someone on the line who could talk me through this. No signal. The mountains had swallowed it. The knocking continued. 3, pause, 3, pause, 3. I called my dispatcher anyway, as soon as I hit a stretch of road where I got a single bar of service. The call kept cutting in and out, but I managed to get through to Danny, the night guy. I told him what was happening, and I could hear the confusion in his voice. He pulled up the records and confirmed what I already knew, that trailer had been empty since Roanoke. No cargo, no last-minute additions, nothing. He asked if I wanted him to call the police, and I said no. What was I going to tell them? That I was hearing ghosts? That something was knocking from inside my empty trailer? Danny told me to find somewhere safe and check it out, and if there was someone inside a stowaway, a homeless person who'd somehow gotten in, to call the cops immediately. I told him I wasn't opening those doors alone in the middle of nowhere. I'd done a lot of things in my career, but I wasn't stupid. Whatever was making that sound, I wasn't facing it by myself on a dark mountain road with no witnesses and no backup. I drove. I drove faster than I should have, taking those curves harder than was safe, pushing my rig because I wanted to be somewhere with lights and people and other truckers who could help me figure out what the hell was going on. The knocking never stopped. It followed me through the mountains, through the hollows, through the darkness. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, mile after mile, hour after hour. I finally pulled into a truck stop near Pikeville, Kentucky, around 2 in the morning. It was one of the big ones, with fuel islands and a restaurant and a parking lot full of other rigs. I'd never been so happy to see other trucks in my life. I parked near the front, close to the lights, and went inside to find someone who could help me. There were 2 other drivers sitting at the counter, drinking coffee and looking like they'd been on the road as long as I had. I must have looked like a crazy person, because they both stared at me when I walked up and started talking. I told them what had been happening, about the knocking, about the empty trailer, about the sound that had followed me for over 100 miles. One of them laughed, not a mean laugh, just the kind of laugh you give when you don't know what else to do. The other one, an older guy with a gray beard and tired eyes, didn't laugh at all. He just nodded slowly, like he'd heard stories like this before. They agreed to come out and help me check. The 3 of us walked back to my rig, flashlights in hand. The truck stop lights cast long shadows across the pavement, and my trailer sat there looking exactly like it always did, just a standard 53-foot dry van, nothing special about it. The knocking had stopped again, just like it had at the rest area. The older driver, whose name I never got, walked around the trailer slowly, checking the seals, checking the locks. Everything was secure. Only one way to know for sure, he said. I broke the seal and unlatched the doors. The younger driver helped me swing them open, and we all shined our flashlights inside at the same time. The trailer was empty, completely empty, no cargo, no debris, no sign that anything had ever been inside. Just bare wooden flooring and aluminum walls reflecting our lights. Except for one thing. Sitting in the exact center of the trailer floor was a child's shoe. A small sneaker, the kind a kid maybe 5 or 6 years old would wear. It was pink with white laces, dirty and worn like it had been used hard. It sat there perfectly upright, positioned so precisely in the middle of the floor that it looked like someone had placed it there deliberately, like it was meant to be found. The 3 of us stood there in silence, staring at that shoe. I could feel the cold seeping into my bones. But it wasn't just the October air. It was something else. Something wrong. The older driver took a step back. I've heard of things like this, he said quietly. Trailers that carry something they shouldn't, something that hitches a ride and doesn't let go. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. That shoe wasn't there when you loaded up, was it? I shook my head. I couldn't speak. I'd loaded and unloaded that trailer myself at least a dozen times over the past 3 weeks. I knew every inch of that floor. That shoe had not been there. It was impossible, and yet there it was, sitting in the center of an empty trailer that had been sealed and locked since Roanoke. The younger driver wanted to pick it up, examine it, maybe figure out where it came from. I told him not to touch it. I don't know why I said that it was just a shoe, just an object, but something in my gut told me we shouldn't disturb it. We shouldn't take it with us. We should leave it exactly where it was and walk away. I closed those doors, sealed them back up, and I walked into the truck stop office and told them I was turning in the trailer. Told them I wanted a different one. Any other one. I didn't care. The manager looked at me like I was crazy, but something in my face must have convinced him not to argue. He gave me the keys to another trailer, and I switched them out right there in the parking lot while the sun was coming up. I never saw that trailer again. The company sold it at auction about a month later, standard procedure for older equipment. I didn't think much about it after that. I tried not to think about it at all. I told myself it was just one of those things, one of those unexplainable events that happens on the road sometimes and doesn't mean anything. Then, about 6 months later, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, a 276 area code, Southwestern Virginia. I answered, and a man's voice came through, nervous and strained. He said he'd gotten my number from the company's records, said he'd bought a trailer at auction, and he wanted to ask me some questions about it. I knew which trailer before he even gave me the unit number. I knew, and my blood went cold. He asked me if anything strange had ever happened with it, asked if I'd ever heard noises, ever found things that shouldn't be there. His voice was shaking. I could hear it through the phone, the fear he was trying to hide. He said something had been knocking from inside the trailer. 3 knocks, then a pause. 3 knocks. And when he'd finally opened the doors to check, he'd found something sitting in the center of the floor. He didn't tell me what it was. He didn't have to. I hung up the phone, and when he called again 3 more times over the next 2 weeks, I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I didn't have any answers to give him. I didn't know what was in that trailer or why it had chosen me, or why it was still there, still knocking, still leaving things behind. All I knew was that I wanted nothing more to do with it. Whatever was attached to that trailer, whatever was riding along in the darkness, it wasn't my burden to carry anymore. But I still think about it sometimes. Late at night, when I'm running empty through the mountains and the road stretches out ahead of me like a ribbon of black. I think about that shoe sitting in the center of an empty floor. I think about the knocking 3, pause, 3, and what might have been making it. I think about the driver who bought that trailer and what he found inside. And sometimes, when the night is very quiet and I'm very tired, I imagine I can still hear it. Faint, distant, but there. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, following me through the dark. There are rules on the road that nobody teaches you. Not the official ones, those you learn in trucking school, in the handbooks, from the DOT inspectors who climb up into your cab and check your logs. I'm talking about the other rules. The ones that get passed down from driver to driver in truck stop diners at 2 in the morning, over coffee that's been sitting on the burner too long, and plates of eggs that taste like they came from a box. These are the rules that keep you alive out there. Don't pick up hitchhikers after dark. Don't stop in certain towns if you can help it. Don't flash your lights at a vehicle running without headlights. Just keep driving and don't look back. And never, under any circumstances, follow another truck too close, or let one follow you. Because if someone's on your tail for no reason, mile after mile, matching your every move, then something's wrong. Something's very wrong. I learned that lesson on a night I'll never forget, no matter how hard I try. It was October of 2016. I was running a load of manufactured goods from Charlotte up to Cleveland, a route I'd done so many times I could practically drive it in my sleep. The first leg was easy up through North Carolina on I-77, then through Virginia and into West Virginia before cutting across to Ohio. It's a long haul, mostly through mountains, and at night those mountains become something else entirely. They close in on you. The valleys drop away into darkness, so complete your headlights seem to stop at the edge of the pavement. The trees press up against the road like they're trying to reclaim it. And the further you get from the cities, the more you feel like you're driving into somewhere that doesn't belong to the modern world anymore. I'd made good time through North Carolina and crossed into Virginia right around 10:30 at night. Traffic was light, a few cars, a couple of other trucks, nothing unusual. I had my radio on, some classic rock station out of Roanoke that kept fading in and out as I moved through the mountains. The CB was quiet, except for occasional chatter from other drivers calling out road conditions, or just shooting the breeze to stay awake. Everything was normal, routine, just another night on the road. Then, somewhere around 11, I noticed the truck behind me. At first, I didn't think anything of it. There's always someone behind you on the interstate. That's just how it works. But after a few miles, I started paying attention. It was a black Peterbilt, an older model, maybe early 2000s. No company markings on the trailer, no logos on the doors, nothing that would identify who owned it or what it was hauling. Just solid black, like a shadow that had taken the shape of a truck. And it was following me at exactly the same distance, maybe 100 feet back. Never closer, never further. I tested it, slowed down to 60, then 55. The Peterbilt slowed with me, maintaining that exact gap. I sped up to 70, then 75, pushing harder than I should have on those mountain curves. The truck behind me matched my speed perfectly, like we were connected by an invisible tow bar. I changed lanes. It changed lanes. I moved back. It moved back. That's when I started to get scared. I tried the CB first, thinking maybe I could raise whoever was driving, ask them what their problem was, tell them to back off or pass. I called out on channel 19, describing the truck, asking if anyone knew who it was. Nothing. Just static and silence. No response from the Peterbilt. No response from anyone else on the road. There was a rest area coming up, one of those small pull-offs with a few parking spots and a building with restrooms. I decided to stop, get out of my truck, walk back, and confront whoever was behind me. I was angry by then, the fear turning into something hotter. I didn't like being played with. I didn't like the feeling of being hunted on my own road. I took the exit and pulled into the rest area. It was deserted, no other vehicles, no lights except for the weak glow from the restroom building. I put my truck in park and waited, watching my mirrors. The black Peterbilt pulled in right behind me, maybe 50 feet back, and stopped. Then it killed its lights. The sudden darkness was disorienting. One moment I could see the outline of the truck in my mirrors. The next it was just a shape, a black mass sitting in the blackness, barely visible against the trees. I waited. 1 minute, 2, 5, 10, 20. No one got out. No door opened. No light came on in the cab. The truck just sat there, engine running. I could hear the low rumble of it, feel the vibration in the air, but completely still otherwise. I had a tire iron behind my seat. I grabbed it and opened my door. The night air hit me like a wall of cold, that sharp October mountain cold that goes right through your jacket. I could smell diesel and dead leaves and something else. Something I couldn't identify. Something wrong. I climbed down from my cab and started walking toward the Peterbilt. The gravel crunched under my boots, impossibly loud in the silence. There was no wind, no insects, no sound at all except for my footsteps and the idle of that engine. As I got closer, I could see the truck more clearly. It was an older 379, the kind they don't make anymore, with the long hood and the classic grille. The paint was flat black, not glossy, like it had been coated with something that absorbed light rather than reflected it. The windows were dark, tinted so heavily I couldn't see inside even when I was standing right next to the cab. I walked around to the driver's side and looked up at the door. "Hey," I shouted. "What the hell is your problem? Why are you following me?" No answer, no movement, nothing. I reached up and grabbed the door handle. It was cold, colder than it should have been, cold enough that it hurt my palm even through the October air. I pulled the door open and shined my flashlight inside. The cab was empty. Not just empty of people, empty of everything. There was a driver's seat and a steering wheel and a dashboard, but nothing else. No personal items, no trash, no CB radio, no logbook, no thermos of coffee, none of the things you always see in a working truck. The sleeper berth behind the seat was the same bare mattress, nothing else. It looked like a truck that had just rolled off the assembly line and had never been used. But the engine was running. I could hear it. I could feel it. The gauges on the dashboard were lit up, showing temperature and oil pressure and everything else. The truck was on, idling, ready to move, but there was no one there to drive it. I backed away. I didn't run, not yet, but I backed away fast, my tire iron raised, my flashlight sweeping the rest area for any sign of someone hiding, waiting to jump out at me. There was no one. I was alone. Just me and my truck and the black Peterbilt with its running engine and its empty cab. I ran back to my truck. I didn't look back. I climbed into my cab and slammed the door and put it in gear and pulled out of that rest area so fast my tires sprayed gravel. I hit the on-ramp doing 50 and merged onto the interstate at 70, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I looked in my mirror. The black Peterbilt was behind me, Same distance, same position, lights on now, cutting through the darkness like eyes, following. I don't know how to describe what I felt in that moment. Terror doesn't cover it. It was deeper than that, more primal. It was the feeling of being prey, of being chased by something that couldn't be reasoned with or fought or escaped. I pushed my truck as hard as I dared, taking those mountain curves faster than was safe, praying I wouldn't jackknife or blow a tire or do something stupid that would end with me wrapped around a guardrail. The Peterbilt never fell behind. It stayed locked onto my tail like a shadow, matching every move I made. I tried the CB again, practically screaming into the mic, begging for anyone to answer, anyone to help. Static. I tried my cell phone, but there was no signal. The mountains had swallowed it. I was alone on that road with something that shouldn't exist, and there was no one coming to save me. This went on for over an hour of pure, sustained terror, driving through the darkness with that black truck in my mirrors, never gaining, never falling back, just following, always following. I started to think it would never end, that I'd drive forever, trapped in some kind of loop, with that phantom on my tail for eternity. Then I saw the sign, "Welcome to West Virginia." I crossed the state line at just after midnight. I remember because I glanced at my dashboard clock right as I passed the welcome sign, thinking that if I could just make it to the next town, the next truck stop, somewhere with lights and people, maybe this nightmare would end. I looked in my mirror. The road behind me was empty. I blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light or my exhausted eyes playing games with me. But no, the Peterbilt was gone. Not pulled off to the side, not hidden behind a curve, just gone, like it had never been there at all. One moment it was following me, and the next the road was clear, just pavement and guardrails and the darkness of the mountains. I pulled over at the first exit I came to, a small town with a gas station and a diner that was still open. I parked my truck and sat in the lot for a long time, shaking, trying to catch my breath, trying to convince myself that what had just happened was real. I went into the diner eventually, ordered coffee I didn't drink, and sat there until the sun came up. Over the next few weeks, I asked around. Every truck stop I went to, every driver I talked to, I described the black Peterbilt. The flat paint, the tinted windows, the empty cab. Most people looked at me like I was crazy or making things up, but two drivers didn't. Two drivers, old-timers who'd been running those roads for decades, listened to my story and nodded slowly, like they'd heard it before. One of them told me about a Peterbilt that had gone off the road on I-77 back in the early 90s. Driver lost control on a curve and went over the side into one of those deep hollows. They found the truck eventually, crushed at the bottom of a ravine, but they never found the driver. Some people said he crawled away and died in the woods. Some people said he was thrown from the cab and his body was never recovered. Either way, the truck was totaled and the case was closed. But ever since then, the old-timer said, drivers had been reporting a black Peterbilt on that stretch of 77, always at night, always following, always vanishing when you crossed into West Virginia. He couldn't explain it, neither could I. But he believed me. He'd seen it too, back in 2003. Said it followed him for 30 miles before disappearing at the state line, exactly like it had with me. I still drive those roads. It's my job, and I'm not going to let one bad night scare me off a route I've been running for years. But I don't drive through that stretch of Virginia after dark anymore. I plan my loads, so I'm through there before sunset, or I stop for the night and pick it up in the morning. It adds hours to my schedule, and my dispatcher doesn't like it, but I don't care. There's no amount of money that would get me back on I-77 at night, because I know what's waiting out there. I know what's still driving that road, following whoever comes through, matching their speed, staying locked onto their tail for reasons I'll never understand. I don't know who he was, the driver of that black Peterbilt. I don't know what he wants or why he can't rest. But I know he's still out there, somewhere in the darkness between the mountains, still looking for someone to follow. And sometimes, when I'm driving at night and I see headlights appear in my mirror, staying at the same distance, matching my speed, I feel that old terror rising up in my chest. I grip the wheel a little tighter. I watch those lights a little longer. And I pray they're not flat black. I pray they don't belong to a truck with no markings, no driver, and no intention of ever letting me go. I've been running freight through Appalachia for 23 years. Started when I was barely old enough to get my CDL, and I've never stopped. Some drivers rotate routes, try to see different parts of the country, keep things fresh. Not me. I found my corridor early, and I stuck with it. Tennessee up through Kentucky, through West Virginia, and into Pennsylvania. Back and forth, week after week, year after year. I know these roads better than I know my own face in the mirror. I know every curve, every grade, every stretch where the pavement gets rough and you need to watch your trailer. I know where the speed traps are, where the best diners hide, where you can pull off and catch a few hours of sleep without anyone bothering you. And I know every rest stop, way station, and truck stop between Nashville and Pittsburgh. Every single one. That's why what happened on Route 23 near Pound Gap doesn't make any sense. And that's why, 3 years later, I still can't sleep through the night without waking up in a cold sweat, reaching for my phone to look at a photograph that shouldn't exist. It was late September of 2021. I was running a load of auto parts from Knoxville up to a distribution center outside of Columbus. Routine run, nothing special about it. I'd left around 7 in the evening, figuring I'd drive through the night and make my delivery by morning. The weather was clear, the roads were dry, and I had a full thermos of coffee and a playlist of old country music to keep me company. Everything was normal. Everything was exactly the way it had been 1,000 times before. I crossed into Kentucky around 10:30, taking Route 23 up through the mountains toward Pound Gap. If you've never driven that stretch, it's one of the lonelier roads in Appalachia. The towns are small and spread out. The mountains press in close on both sides, and once you get past Jenkins, the traffic thins out to almost nothing. At night, you can go 20 or 30 miles without seeing another vehicle. Just you and the road and the darkness and the ancient hills watching you pass. I was about halfway through Letcher County when I started feeling the need to stop. Nothing urgent. I didn't need fuel, didn't need food, but my legs were stiff and my back was starting to ache the way it does when you've been sitting too long. I figured I'd pull off at the next rest area, stretch for a few minutes, maybe use the bathroom, and then push on through to Pikeville. That's when I saw it. There was a rest area on the right side of the road, a small one, just a pull-off with maybe 4 or 5 parking spots and a single brick building that I assumed held restrooms. I'd never noticed it before, but that didn't immediately strike me as strange. The state builds new facilities sometimes. Maybe they'd put this one in recently, and I just hadn't paid attention on my last few runs. It happens. I pulled in and parked. Mine was the only vehicle there, which wasn't unusual for that time of night on that stretch of road. The lot was paved but cracked, with weeds pushing up through the seams in a way that suggested it hadn't been maintained in a while. The building sat about 50 feet from the parking spots, a low rectangular structure made of brown brick that had seen better days. There was a single light above the door, one of those old sodium bulbs that gives off a sickly yellow glow, and it was flickering. Not in the normal way lights flicker when they're about to die, but in a rhythm, on off, steady as a heartbeat. I should have stayed in my truck. Looking back, I know that. Something in my gut was already telling me that this place was wrong, that I should put it in gear and get back on the highway and never look back. But I didn't listen. I told myself I was being paranoid. Told myself it was just a rest stop, just a building, just a place to stretch my legs for a few minutes. I climbed down from my cab and started walking toward the restroom. The moment my boots hit the pavement, I felt it. The silence. It was absolute, complete, suffocating. No insects chirping, no wind rustling the trees, no distant hum of traffic from the highway. Nothing. Just dead, empty silence. The kind that doesn't exist in nature. The kind that makes your ears ring because your brain can't process the absence of sound. I stopped walking and stood there, listening. My own breathing seemed impossibly loud. The crunch of gravel under my feet when I shifted my weight was like thunder. I looked around, trying to figure out what was wrong, trying to identify the source of the wrongness that was crawling up my spine. The trees around the rest area were still, not swaying in a breeze, not moving at all. The leaves hung motionless, like they'd been frozen in place. The sky above was overcast, a solid blanket of gray that blocked out the stars and the moon, giving the whole scene a flat, colorless quality. I should have left. I know that now. But I was already halfway to the building, and some stubborn part of me refused to turn around. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was just a quiet night, just an empty rest stop, nothing to be afraid of. I reached the door and pushed it open. The hinges groaned, a long, low sound that echoed in the silence. Inside, there was a short hallway with two doors, one marked men, one marked women, and a single fluorescent light overhead that buzzed and flickered in time with the one outside. The floor was concrete, stained and cracked. The walls were covered in tile, the kind you see in old public restrooms, cream-colored and grimy with age. And the walls were covered in names. At first, I thought it was graffiti. People scratch their names into bathroom walls all the time. It's crude and pointless. But it's not unusual. But as I looked closer, I realized this was something else. There were hundreds of names, maybe thousands, carved into the tile, scratched into the wood of the door frames, etched into the concrete floor. They covered every surface, overlapping and intersecting, some so old the letters had worn smooth, others so fresh the scratches still showed raw white against the grime. I walked deeper into the building, my flashlight out now, sweeping the beam across the walls. The names went on and on, first names, last names, initials, dates. Some had messages with them, brief, cryptic things like, "I was here," or "God help me," or just "Why." The handwriting varied wildly, from neat block letters to frantic scrawls that were barely legible. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming faster. This wasn't normal. This wasn't anything close to normal. And then I saw a name I recognized. It was on the wall of the men's room, about chest height, carved into the tile with something sharp. The letters were uneven, shaky, like whoever had made them was in a hurry or couldn't hold their hands steady. But they were clear enough to read. Tommy Vance, 2011. I stood there staring at that name, and the world seemed to tilt under my feet. Tommy Vance. I knew Tommy. He'd been a driver like me, ran routes through Appalachia for a company out of Louisville. We'd crossed paths at truck stops over the years, shared meals, swapped stories. He was a good guy, quiet, kept to himself mostly, but always ready with a joke or a piece of advice if you needed it. And then, in 2011, he disappeared, went out on a run one night, and never came back. His truck was found a few days later, parked at a pull-off somewhere in eastern Kentucky, engine off, doors locked, no sign of Tommy anywhere. They searched the woods, dredged the nearby creeks, put up flyers and offered rewards. Nothing. He was just gone. His body was never found. The case went cold within a year. And now his name was carved into the wall of a rest stop that didn't exist. I took out my phone and snapped a picture. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the thing steady. But I got the shot. Tommy's name, clear as day, surrounded by dozens of others I didn't recognize. Then I turned and ran. I don't remember the run back to my truck. I don't remember climbing into the cab or starting the engine or pulling back onto the highway. The next thing I knew, I was doing 80 down Route 23, my heart hammering in my chest, my eyes fixed on the road ahead because I was too afraid to look in my mirrors. I didn't stop until I reached Pikeville, until I was in a well-lit truck stop with other vehicles and other people and the normal sounds of life around me. I sat in that parking lot until dawn, too shaken to sleep, too scared to move. When the sun finally came up, I made a decision. I was going to go back. I was going to find that rest stop in daylight, prove to myself that it was real, that there was some rational explanation for what I'd seen. Maybe it was an abandoned facility, something the state had closed years ago and never bothered to demolish. Maybe the names on the wall were some kind of local legend, a place where people went to leave their marks for whatever reason. There had to be an explanation. I drove back down Route 23, retracing my route from the night before. I watched the mile markers, watched the landmarks, watched for the pull-off where I'd stopped. I drove the whole stretch from Pikeville to Jenkins and back again, twice. There was no rest stop. The spot where I'd pulled in the night before was just a stretch of guardrail and trees. No parking lot, no brick building, no flickering light, nothing. It was like the place had never existed. I pulled over and got out, walked along the shoulder, looking for any sign of what I'd seen. Tire tracks, broken pavement, anything. There was nothing, just woods and road and the mountains rising up on either side. I drove to the nearest town and asked around. Did anyone know about a rest stop on Route 23 near Pound Gap? Old one, maybe abandoned? No one had any idea what I was talking about. I contacted the Kentucky Highway Department. They had no record of any facility at that location. I checked old maps, historical records, planning documents. Nothing. There had never been a rest stop there, not officially, not ever. But I still have the photo on my phone. I look at it sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep. The tile wall, the names, Tommy Vance, 2011. It's right there, clear as day. Proof that I was somewhere, that I saw something, that it wasn't just a dream or a hallucination or a trick of my exhausted mind. I've talked to other drivers about it. Not many, just a few I trust. Guys who've been running these roads as long as I have. Most of them look at me like I'm crazy, but a couple of them get real quiet when I tell my story. One old-timer, a guy named Earl who's been hauling freight since the 70s, told me he'd heard stories about places like that. Places that appear and disappear. Places that exist outside of normal space and time. He said there are spots in Appalachia where the mountains are so old and the hollows are so deep that reality gets thin. Things leak through. Things that shouldn't be. I don't know if I believe that. I don't know what I believe anymore. All I know is that I stopped at a rest area that doesn't exist, walked into a building full of names, and found the signature of a man who vanished 10 years earlier. I don't know what that place was. I don't know why I found it or why it let me leave. And I don't know what happened to Tommy Vance or any of the other people whose names are scratched into those walls. I still drive Route 23. It's part of my route, and I'm not going to let one bad night scare me away from making a living. But I don't stop anymore. Not on that stretch. Not for anything. If I need to rest, I push through to Pikeville, or I turn around and head back toward Jenkins. I don't pull over, don't even slow down. And every time I pass that spot on the highway, the spot where the rest stop appeared and then wasn't, I feel something. A chill, a pull, like something on the other side of the trees is watching me, waiting for me to stop again. I think about Tommy sometimes. I think about where he might be, if he's anywhere at all. I think about the hundreds of other names on those walls. People who stopped at a place that shouldn't exist and never made it back out. I wonder if their trucks were found, engines off, doors locked, no sign of them anywhere. I wonder if anyone is still looking for them. And I wonder, in the darkest hours of the night when sleep won't come, if my name will end up on that wall someday. If I'll pull off at a rest stop that wasn't there a moment before, walk inside to stretch my legs, and never come out. If years from now, some other driver will shine a flashlight across those tiles and see my name carved among the hundreds of others, with no explanation, no context, just proof that I was there before I was gone. I don't know what I walked into that night. I don't think I ever will, but I know it was real. I know it's still out there, somewhere in the thin places between the mountains. And I know that if you drive through Appalachia long enough, eventually you'll find it too. I just hope you're smart enough to keep driving. I don't pick up hitchhikers anymore. I know that makes me sound cold, especially in a profession where we're supposed to look out for each other, where the unwritten code says you help a fellow traveler when you can. But after what happened on the mountain roads outside Hazard, Kentucky, I made a promise to myself, never again. No matter how cold it is, no matter how guilty I feel watching someone walk alone in the dark, I keep my doors locked and my eyes forward and I drive on by. Because some things, once you see them, you can't unsee. And some lessons, once you learn them, you don't need to learn twice. It was November of 2018, deep into fall when the mountains start to show their teeth. The leaves were mostly gone by then, stripped from the trees by early winds, leaving behind a landscape of gray branches and brown earth that looked more dead than dormant. I was running a load of machine parts from Lexington down to a plant in Whitesburg, a route that took me through some of the most isolated stretches of road in eastern Kentucky. I'd driven it before, plenty of times, but never at night. My schedule had gotten pushed back by a loading delay, and by the time I was winding through the mountains outside Hazard, it was well past 10 o'clock and dark as the inside of a coffin. The temperature had dropped hard that evening. I remember checking the gauge on my dashboard and seeing it hover around 28 degrees, cold enough for frost, cold enough that anyone caught outside without shelter would be in real trouble. The heater in my cab was working overtime, blowing warm air that fogged the edges of my windshield. Outside, the world was black and silent, nothing but the beam of my headlights cutting through the darkness and the occasional flash of a reflector marking a curve in the road. That's when I saw him. He was walking along the shoulder, moving in the same direction I was traveling, his back to me. Even from a distance, I could tell he was bundled up against the cold, heavy coat, dark pants, something covering his head that might have been a hood or a hat. He wasn't moving fast, just a steady trudge, the kind of walk that says you've been at it for a long time and you've still got a long way to go. My headlights washed over him as I approached, and I saw him lift one hand, not quite a wave, more like an acknowledgement that he knew I was there. Something in my gut told me not to stop. I can't explain it any better than that. There was no logical reason for the feeling. He was just a man walking in the cold, probably stranded, probably in need of help. But something about the way he moved, the way he didn't turn around, the way that raised hand seemed less like a greeting and more like a summons, it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I eased off the gas, thinking about it, arguing with myself. The Good Samaritan in me said I couldn't leave someone out there in weather like this. The animal part of my brain, the part that still remembers what it means to be prey, said to keep driving and not look back. I stopped anyway. I pulled ahead of him, maybe 50 feet, and put my truck in park. I watched in my side mirror as he approached, that same steady pace, not hurrying even though a warm cab was waiting for him. It took him longer than it should have to cover the distance. Or maybe that's just how I remember it. Time gets strange when you're scared. He reached the passenger side and climbed up into the cab. He did it smoothly, like he'd been in a truck before, like he knew exactly how high the step was and where to grab the handle. The dome light came on when the door opened, and I got my first real look at him. Heavy brown coat, worn but clean, work boots, gloves. His head was covered by a hood pulled up from under the coat, and his face was tilted down, hidden in shadow. He pulled the door closed behind him, and the dome light went off, and we were in darkness again except for the glow of my dashboard. "Where you headed?" I asked. He didn't answer, just raised one gloved hand and pointed forward, down the road, into the black. Fine, I thought. Some folks don't like to talk. Plenty of people I'd met in my years of driving didn't want conversation. They just wanted to get where they were going. I put the truck in gear and started moving, figuring I'd take him as far as the next town and let him sort himself out from there. We drove in silence for maybe 10 minutes. The road wound through the mountains, curves and grades and stretches of guardrail with nothing but black space beyond. My passenger sat perfectly still, hands in his lap, head bowed. He didn't move, didn't shift in his seat, didn't make any of the small unconscious adjustments people normally make when they're sitting somewhere new. It was like he'd gone to sleep with his eyes open, or like he wasn't really there at all. I tried to shake the feeling, told myself I was being paranoid, but the silence was getting to me. It wasn't natural. Even quiet people make some noise breathing, the rustle of clothing, something. This man made nothing. He sat there like a mannequin, and the cab of my truck, which had always felt comfortable and familiar, started to feel like a cage. I glanced over at him. Just a quick look, a second at most, to reassure myself that everything was normal. He had turned to face me, and there was nothing there. I don't mean his face was hidden or obscured. I mean it wasn't there. Where his features should have been eyes, nose, mouth, there was just skin. Smooth, pale skin stretched over the contours of a skull, like someone had taken a person and erased everything that made them recognizable. No expression, no identity, just a blank white void where a face should have been. I screamed. I couldn't help it. The sound tore out of me before I even knew what I was doing. I jerked the wheel hard to the left, and my truck swerved across the center line, tires screaming on the cold pavement. For a moment, I thought I was going to go over the edge, down into one of those black hollows with no bottom. But somehow I caught it, wrestled the wheel back, got the truck under control. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I looked at the passenger seat. It was empty. The door was still closed. The window was still up. There was no way anyone could have gotten out without me seeing, without me hearing. But the seat was empty. The man with no face was gone. I drove. I drove faster than I should have, faster than was safe on those winding mountain roads. I didn't care. I needed to be somewhere with lights and people and the sounds of normal life. I needed to be anywhere but on that dark road with the memory of that blank face burned into my mind. I made it to Hazard around 11:30. There was a gas station open, and next to it a small sheriff's substation, the kind they have in rural areas for deputies working the night shift. I pulled into the lot and sat there for a while, trying to get my breathing under control, trying to convince myself that what had just happened was real. Eventually, I went inside. There was a deputy at the desk, an older guy with a gray mustache and tired eyes that looked like they'd seen too much over too many years. I told him what happened. I told him about the hitchhiker, about the silence, about the face that wasn't there, about the empty seat. I expected him to laugh at me, or to look at me like I was crazy, or to call for a breathalyzer. He didn't do any of those things. He just nodded slowly, like what I was telling him wasn't news at all. "You're not the first," he said. I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. There've been reports going back years, truckers, mostly. Sometimes other folks driving through at night. They all tell the same story. Man on the side of the road, dressed for cold weather, face hidden. They pick him up, he points forward, doesn't speak, and then they look at him, and there's nothing there. No face, no features, just blank. He shook his head. "Every one of them swears it's real. Every one of them comes in here looking exactly like you do right now." "What is it?" I asked. "What did I pick up?" The deputy was quiet for a moment. "I don't know," he said finally. "Nobody does. There's stories, of course. Old mountain stories about things that walk the roads at night, things that don't belong to this world. But stories don't explain anything. They just give you something to tell yourself so you can sleep." He stood up and walked to a filing cabinet in the corner of the room. He pulled out a folder and brought it back to the desk. Inside were reports, typed and handwritten, going back decades. I flipped through them. Different dates, different names, different descriptions of the weather and the road conditions. But the core of every story was the same. A man with no face, a cab that was suddenly empty, a driver who would never be the same. 3 other truckers, the deputy said. At least 3 who reported it to us, probably more who didn't. All on that same stretch of road you were driving tonight. All at night, all in the cold months. We've never found an explanation. We've never found anyone matching the description, and we've never had anyone harmed, at least not physically." He paused. "It just happens, and then it's over. And the only thing you can do is forget about it and keep driving." I stayed in Hazard that night, rented a room at a motel on the edge of town, and lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, seeing that blank face every time I closed my eyes. The next day, I finished my delivery to Whitesburg. The day after that, I drove home to Lexington, and for a while, I tried to do what the deputy said. I tried to forget about it and keep driving. But you can't forget something like that. It doesn't work that way. That face, that absence of a face, it lives in my head now. It's there when I'm lying in bed at night. It's there when I'm driving alone and the road gets dark and empty. It's there every time I see someone walking on the shoulder of the highway, every time I feel that old impulse to pull over and offer a ride. The impulse is still there, but now there's something stronger underneath it: fear. I've talked to other truckers about it over the years. Quietly, carefully, the way you bring up something you know sounds crazy. Most of them don't know what I'm talking about, but a few of them do. A few of them get real quiet and won't meet my eyes, and I know they've seen it too. They've picked up the hitchhiker with no face, and they've carried that image with them ever since. I don't know what it is. I've read about ghost stories, urban legends, the kind of tales that get passed around in the mountains and take on a life of their own. Some people think it's the spirit of someone who died on that road, someone whose identity was lost and who wanders now trying to find it. Some people think it's something older, something that was in these mountains before people came, something that doesn't understand what faces are supposed to look like because it never had one itself. I don't believe any of it, but I don't disbelieve it either. I just know what I saw. These days, I still drive through eastern Kentucky sometimes. The routes take me that way, and I'm not going to lose work over one bad night. But I don't drive that stretch near Hazard after dark anymore. I plan my loads so I'm through there before sunset, or I stop somewhere and wait until morning. And when I'm on the road at night, no matter where I am, I don't stop for hitchhikers, ever. I see them sometimes, standing on the shoulder, thumb out, waiting for someone to take pity on them, and I feel guilty. I feel like a coward. I know that most of them are just people having a hard time, people who need help, people I could save from a cold night with nothing more than a few miles of my time. But then I remember that cab. I remember turning my head and seeing nothing where a face should be. I remember the scream that came out of me before I even knew I was making a sound, and I keep driving. The deputy told me to forget about it, but he was wrong. You don't forget something like that. You just learn to live with it. You learn to carry it with you, a cold weight in your chest that never quite goes away. And every night, when the road gets dark and the mountains press in close, you remember. You remember that there are things out there that don't belong to any world you understand. Things that walk the roads and wait for someone to stop. Things that wear the shape of a man but have no face to call their own. I don't know what he wanted, the hitchhiker with no face. I don't know where he was trying to go or why he needed a ride to get there. But I know he's still out there, walking that cold stretch of road outside Hazard, waiting for the next driver to feel sorry enough to stop. And I hope whoever that driver is, they listen to their gut. I hope they keep their foot on the gas and their eyes on the road and drive right on by. Because some rides aren't worth taking, and some passengers, once they're in your cab, never really leave. My CB radio has been my lifeline for over 15 years. That might sound dramatic to people who don't understand what long-haul trucking is really like, but it's the truth. Out on these roads, especially the ones that cut through the mountains of Appalachia, you're alone in a way that most people never experience. No cell service for miles at a stretch, no other vehicles sometimes for an hour or more. Just you and the engine and the darkness pressing in from all sides. The CB is what connects you to the rest of the world. It's how you hear about accidents ahead, about weather rolling in, about speed traps and road closures, and all the little pieces of information that can mean the difference between getting home safe and not getting home at all. I've heard truckers call out warnings that saved my life. I've called out warnings that saved theirs. It's a community, even when we're scattered across hundreds of miles of empty highway. That's why when my radio started acting strange on US 460 through Buchanan County, Virginia, I should have taken it as a sign. I should have pulled over, turned around, found another route, but I didn't. And now I carry what happened that night with me everywhere I go. It was March of 2020, right before the world shut down, for reasons none of us saw coming. I was running a load of lumber from a mill in West Virginia up to a construction site near Roanoke. The route took me through some of the most remote stretches of road in the region, narrow two-lane highways that wound through hollows so deep the sun only touched the pavement for a few hours a day. I'd driven it before, always in daylight, always without incident. But my schedule had slipped that day, and by the time I crossed into Buchanan County, the sun was long gone and the darkness had settled in, like it owned the place. The first thing I noticed was the silence on the CB. I'd been chatting with a driver heading the opposite direction, a guy hauling refrigerated goods down toward Tennessee, when the signal just cut out. One moment we were talking about the weather, the next there was nothing. I figured we'd hit one of those dead zones, the mountains do that sometimes, create pockets where signals can't reach. I switched channels, looking for anyone else, but all I got was static. Not normal static though. That's what I noticed almost immediately. Normal static is random, chaotic, the sound of electromagnetic noise that means nothing. This static had a pattern to it, a rhythm. It swelled and faded in a way that reminded me of something I couldn't quite place. It took me a few minutes to figure out what it was. Breathing. It sounded like breathing. Long, slow inhales, followed by long, slow exhales, hidden underneath the crackle and hiss of the static. I told myself I was imagining it, told myself my tired brain was finding patterns where there weren't any. But the longer I listened, the clearer it became. Something was breathing through my radio. I checked my dashboard clock and made a mental note of my position. I was maybe 5 miles into Buchanan County, with at least 20 more to go before I crossed into the next jurisdiction. The road ahead was empty, nothing but my headlights cutting through the dark. The trees pressed in close on both sides, bare branches reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. No houses, no signs of life, just the road and the mountains and the breathing, static filling my cab. That's when I heard the voice. It was buried in the noise at first, so faint I thought I was imagining it. But then it came again, clearer this time, and there was no mistaking it. A voice, distorted and distant, speaking through the static. The words were broken up, fragmented by interference, but I could make them out. Turn around. I reached for the CB and keyed the mic. Hello? Who is this? What channel are you on? No response, just the breathing static, and, beneath it, the voice again. Turn around, turn around, turn around. I switched channels. Every single one, all 40 of them, had the same thing. The same breathing, the same voice, the same words, repeated over and over like a warning on loop. Turn around, turn around, turn around. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I told myself there had to be an explanation, some kind of interference from a local source, maybe a radio tower malfunctioning or someone running a pirate broadcast. It happened sometimes. Weird things came through the airwaves in these mountains. But the voice didn't sound like a prank. It didn't sound like a malfunction. It sounded desperate, afraid, like whoever was speaking knew something I didn't. I kept driving. What else was I going to do? Stop in the middle of nowhere because my radio was acting up? I had a delivery to make, a schedule to keep. I wasn't about to let some static and a strange voice turn me around on a road I'd driven before. I reached over and turned the volume down, trying to drown out the sound with my own thoughts. But I couldn't ignore what I saw next. They were standing in the tree line, figures, maybe a dozen of them, on both sides of the road. They weren't moving, just standing there, perfectly still, facing the highway, facing me. I caught them in my headlights as I came around a curve, and for a moment, I thought they were deer. Just deer standing at the edge of the woods, the way deer do sometimes at night. But deer don't stand upright. Deer don't have arms hanging at their sides. These were people, or at least they had the shape of people. I couldn't make out any details. They were too far back in the shadows, just silhouettes against the darker black of the forest. But I could feel them watching. I could feel their attention on me, tracking my truck as it passed. My foot eased off the gas without me telling it to, some instinct taking over, some part of my brain that recognized a threat even if I couldn't articulate what it was. The voice on my radio got louder. Turn around, turn around, turn around. I floored it. My engine roared as I pushed the truck as fast as I dared on that winding road. The figures blurred past on either side, more of them now, appearing at the edge of my headlight beams and then vanishing into the darkness behind me. They didn't move. They didn't chase me. They just stood there, watching, as I fled through their gauntlet. And the whole time, my radio screamed with static and that voice, louder now, almost angry, repeating the same words over and over until they stopped sounding like words at all and became something else. A sound, a feeling, a pressure inside my head that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. I don't know how long I drove like that. It felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The mile markers ticked by, and I counted them obsessively, needing to know how much farther I had to go before I was out of that county, out of whatever was happening on that road. The figures kept appearing, always at the edge of the light, always perfectly still. I stopped looking at them directly. I couldn't. Every time I did, the voice on the radio got louder, more insistent, more demanding. And then, suddenly, it was over. I saw the sign, "Welcome to Tazewell County," flash past in my headlights, and in that instant, everything changed. The static cut out. The voice stopped. My radio clicked, and I heard the normal hiss of empty channels, the familiar silence of a working CB with no one nearby to talk to. I checked my mirrors. The road behind me was empty, no figures, no shadows, nothing but pavement and darkness. I pulled over at the first wide spot I could find, a gravel turnout overlooking a hollow I couldn't see in the dark. I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, trying to get my breathing under control. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. I looked at the clock and did the math. 23 miles. I'd driven exactly 23 miles through that county, and for every one of them, my radio had been filled with breathing and that voice telling me to turn around. I didn't sleep that night. I finished my delivery to Roanoke, running on adrenaline and fear, and then I pulled into a truck stop and sat in my cab until the sun came up. Even in daylight, with people around and the normal sounds of life surrounding me, I couldn't shake what had happened. I kept hearing that voice in my head, "Turn around, turn around, turn around." And I kept seeing those figures, standing motionless at the edge of the light, watching me pass. A few days later, after I'd gotten home and had some time to process, I called a trucker I knew. His name was Dale, and he'd been running routes through Appalachia for longer than I'd been alive. If anyone would know what I'd experienced, it would be him. I told him everything, the static, the breathing, the voice, the figures. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Where exactly did this happen?" he asked. "Buchanan County," I said, "on 460, between Council and Grundy." Another long silence. When Dale spoke again, his voice was different, quieter, heavier. "Don't drive through there at night again," he said. "What? Why? What's out there?" "I don't know," he said. "Nobody knows. But I've heard stories. Drivers who've seen things on that stretch. Heard things. Some of them don't talk about it. Some of them quit driving altogether after. And a few." He trailed off. "A few what?" "A few didn't make it out." I pressed him for more, but he wouldn't say anything else. Just told me to avoid Buchanan County after dark and to forget what I'd seen. He said some roads weren't meant for nighttime travel. Some places in these mountains still belong to something else. Something older than the highways and the trucks and the people who drove them. He said the voice on my radio was a warning, and I was lucky I heard it. Lucky I made it through. I still don't know what any of that means. I've tried researching Buchanan County, looking for news stories or police reports or anything that might explain what happened that night. I've found bits and pieces, missing persons cases that were never solved, accidents that didn't quite make sense, local legends about things in the woods that the old-timers won't talk about except in whispers. Nothing concrete, nothing that explains the breathing static or the voice or the figures standing silent in the dark. I don't drive through Buchanan County anymore, ever. I plan my routes around it, even if it adds hours to my trip. My dispatcher thinks I'm crazy, but I don't care. I know what I heard, I know what I saw, and I know that voice was telling me something, warning me about something, even if I don't understand what. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm on a lonely stretch of road and the static starts creeping into my radio, I feel it again. That pressure, that sense of being watched. I turn the volume down and focus on the road and tell myself it's nothing. Just interference, just my imagination. But deep down, I know the truth. Whatever's out there on that stretch of 460, it's still there, still waiting, still breathing through the static. And if you ever find yourself driving through Buchanan County after dark, and your radio starts acting strange, and you hear a voice telling you to turn around, listen, do what I should have done, turn around and don't look back. Because I made it through that night, but I don't know why. I don't know what those figures wanted or why they let me pass, and I don't ever want to find out. I've been driving trucks for nearly 18 years now, and in that time I've seen plenty of things that don't make sense. Strange lights over empty fields, shadows that move wrong in the tree line, sounds that come through the radio when there shouldn't be anyone broadcasting. You learn to file these things away, to not think about them too hard, to focus on the road and the load and getting home safe. Most of it can be explained if you try hard enough. Fatigue, tricks of the light, the mind playing games when you've been awake too long. But some things can't be explained. Some things stay with you, burrowing into your memory like splinters you can't dig out. What happened to me on a cold night in eastern Tennessee is one of those things. It was February of 2019, dead of winter, the kind of cold that seeps into everything no matter how high you crank the heat. I was running a late load of industrial equipment from Knoxville up to a distribution center in Virginia. Should have been a straightforward run, but I'd gotten a late start due to paperwork issues at the warehouse, and by the time I was on the road, it was well past midnight. The highways were mostly empty at that hour, just me and the occasional car and the endless black ribbon of pavement stretching out ahead. The route took me through the mountains of upper eastern Tennessee, up along I-81 for a stretch, and then onto some of the older state highways that wind through the hollows. These are old roads, roads that were there before the interstates, roads that remember when the mountains were even more isolated than they are now. During the day, they're beautiful sweeping views of ridges and valleys, small towns tucked into the gaps between hills. At night, there's something else. The trees press in close. The guardrails mark the edge of drops you can't see the bottom of. And the overpasses, old concrete structures from the 1,950 seconds and 60 seconds loom overhead, like the bones of giants. It was around 3 in the morning when I passed under the first overpass. I wasn't paying much attention to it. Overpasses are just part of the landscape when you're driving, especially at night. Your headlights sweep across the concrete. You see the shadow of the bridge flash overhead, and then you're past it and moving on. But something caught my eye as I approached this one. Movement, maybe, or the suggestion of movement. Shapes on top of the overpass, silhouetted against the dim glow of the clouded sky. I looked up as I passed underneath, just a quick glance, the way you do when something catches your attention, and I saw them. 3 children, standing at the edge of the overpass, looking down at the highway, looking down at me. They were small, young, maybe 6 or 7 years old at most. I couldn't make out their faces in the darkness, but I could see the outlines of their bodies clearly against the sky. They were standing perfectly still, evenly spaced along the edge of the overpass, hands at their sides, heads tilted downward, just standing there, watching. The sight of them sent a chill through me, but I kept driving. What else was I going to do? Pull over on a dark highway at 3 in the morning to investigate why there were children standing on an overpass? It wasn't safe to stop, and besides, what would I even do? Climb up there? Call the police? I figured maybe they were teenagers playing a prank, or maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me after too many hours on the road. I made a mental note to call it in when I got to the next town with cell service and put it out of my mind. For about an hour, I managed not to think about it. The road wound through the mountains, climbing and descending, and I focused on the curves and the grades and the feel of the truck beneath me. My CB was quiet, no one else on the channels at that hour. Just me and the engine and the endless dark. Then I came to another overpass. This one looked almost identical to the first old concrete, same style, same era. But that wasn't what made my hands tighten on the wheel. What made my hands tighten was the 3 figures standing on top of it. Same positions, same spacing, same downward stare. 3 children, looking down at the highway, looking down at me. I passed under the overpass and felt every hair on my body stand on end. My foot came off the gas, and I found myself slowing down, staring into my side mirrors, trying to see the figures on the bridge behind me. But they were just shapes in the darkness now, shrinking as I pulled away. This wasn't possible. I'd been driving for over an hour since the first overpass. I was at least 60 miles away from it, maybe more. There was no way those same children could have gotten ahead of me. No way they could have known which overpass I'd pass under next. And yet they were the same. I knew they were the same. The spacing, the posture, the way they stood so perfectly still, it was identical. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. The signal was weak, cutting in and out, but I managed to get through to a dispatcher. I told her I wanted to report children on an overpass. She asked me which one. I told her both that I'd seen the same children on 2 different overpasses an hour apart. She went quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, careful. "We'll send someone to check it out," she said. "Can you describe the children?" I tried. Small, maybe 6 or 7. Couldn't see their faces. They were just standing there. She took my information and told me a patrol would investigate. I never heard anything back. I finished my delivery the next morning and headed home, pushing through the exhaustion because I couldn't bear the thought of stopping anywhere near those mountains. For the next few weeks, I tried to forget about what I'd seen. Told myself it was fatigue, stress, some kind of optical illusion caused by the way the streetlights hit the overpasses. I almost believed it. Then I stopped at a diner outside of Knoxville. It was a trucker's diner, one of those places that's been there forever, with vinyl booths and coffee that tastes like it was brewed in 1975. I was sitting at the counter, working on a plate of eggs and trying not to fall asleep, when an older driver sat down next to me. We got to talking the way truckers do routes, weather, the usual. He said he'd been running these roads for 40 years, knew every mile of them. I don't know what made me bring it up. Maybe it was the way he talked about the mountains, like he knew them in a way that went beyond just driving through. Maybe I just needed to tell someone, but I told him about the children on the overpass, about seeing them twice, about how they couldn't have been in both places. He set his coffee cup down slowly, not like he was surprised, more like he was bracing himself for something. 3 of them? He asked. Small? Just standing there, looking down? I nodded. He was quiet for a long moment. The diner seemed to get quieter around us, the sounds of conversation and clinking dishes fading into the background. "People been seeing those kids since the 70s, he said. "Maybe earlier. Nobody knows who they are. Nobody knows where they came from. They just show up on the overpasses at night. Always 3 of them. Always watching." I felt the cold creep back into my bones. What are they? Nobody knows that either. He picked up his coffee again, but didn't drink. Just held it, staring into it like he might find answers there. Some folks think they're ghosts. Kids who died in an accident on one of those bridges, maybe. Others think there's something else. Something that was in these mountains before the roads were built. Something that uses the bridges as, I don't know, hunting grounds. Hunting grounds. He looked at me then, and his eyes were hard, serious. The eyes of a man who'd seen things he wished he hadn't. The ones who stop to investigate, he said, are the ones who don't come back. I opened my mouth to ask what he meant, but he was already standing up, digging bills out of his wallet to pay for his coffee. My advice? He said, don't drive those overpasses at night anymore. And if you do, if you see them again, don't slow down. Don't stop. Don't look at them any longer than you have to. Just keep driving and pray they lose interest. He left before I could say anything else. I sat there for a long time, my eggs getting cold in front of me, thinking about those three small figures standing perfectly still on the edge of the concrete, thinking about the way they'd look down at me as I passed, thinking about what it meant that people had been seeing them for 50 years, and no one knew who they were or what they wanted. I still drive those roads sometimes. The routes take me that way, and I can't avoid them entirely, but I've changed my habits. I don't drive through the mountains of eastern Tennessee at night if I can help it. I plan my loads, so I'm through there before dark, or I stop somewhere and wait for daylight. And when I do have to pass under an overpass after sunset, I keep my eyes forward. I don't look up. I don't slow down. I just drive. But sometimes, even with my eyes on the road, I feel it. A presence, a weight, the sense that something is watching me from above, small heads tilted downward, blank stares tracking my truck as it passes beneath them. I never see them anymore. I've trained myself not to look, but I know they're there. I know they're still standing on those bridges in the dark, waiting for someone to stop, waiting for someone to investigate, waiting for whatever it is they're waiting for. I think about the old truckers' words a lot. The ones who stop are the ones who don't come back. I wonder how many drivers over the years have seen those children and pulled over to check on them. I wonder what happened when they climbed up to the overpasses. I wonder if they found anything at all, or if the children simply vanished the moment someone got close, or if the children did something worse. I'll never know. And honestly, I don't want to know. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Some roads are better left untraveled after dark. And some children standing on overpasses at 3 in the morning are better left alone. If you ever find yourself driving through eastern Tennessee at night, and you pass under an old concrete overpass, and you see 3 small figures standing at the edge, don't stop. Don't slow down. Don't even look up if you can help it. Just keep driving, as fast as you safely can, and don't look back. Because I can't shake the feeling that they're not just watching us pass. They're waiting for someone to come to them. And whatever happens when someone finally does, I don't think it ends well. I still see them in my dreams sometimes. 3 children, standing in the dark, looking down with faces I've never seen clearly. They don't move. They don't speak. They just watch. And in the dreams, I always slow down. I always pull over. I always get out of my truck and start walking toward the bridge. And every time I wake up before I get there, sweating, heart pounding, grateful for daylight. But one of these nights, I'm afraid the dream won't end in time. One of these nights, I'm afraid I'll finally see what's waiting on top of that overpass. And when I do, I don't think I'll be waking up at all. Every trucker who runs regular routes through Appalachia knows the way stations like they know their own faces. You learn which ones are strict, which ones wave you through, which ones have inspectors who like to find problems even when there aren't any. You learn the hours they operate, the days they're closed, the times when pulling in is mandatory, and the times when you can slide right past. It becomes automatic after a while, just another part of the job, as routine as checking your mirrors or downshifting on a grade. That's why, when I saw the way station on Route 52 lit up at 2 in the morning, I didn't question it. I just pulled in. I should have questioned it. That station closes at 10. Every trucker who runs that route knows this. I'd passed it 100 times before, always dark after hours, nothing but an empty building and an abandoned scale. But on that night in October of 2017, it was lit up like it was the middle of the day. Lights in the windows, lights above the scale, the little booth where the inspector sits, glowing yellow against the darkness of the mountains. I remember thinking they must be running some kind of late checkpoint, maybe a special operation, one of those surprise inspections they do sometimes to catch drivers who are out of compliance. It happens. Not often, but it happens. So I pulled in, eased my truck onto the scale like I'd done countless times before, and waited for the light to tell me whether to pull around to the inspection bay or continue on. The light stayed red. I sat there for a minute, maybe 2, watching the booth, waiting for someone to come out and wave me forward or motion for me to pull around. Nothing happened. The booth was maybe 50 feet ahead of me, and I could see someone inside a figure sitting at the desk, silhouetted against the light, but they weren't moving. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The light stayed red. The figure in the booth stayed still. No other trucks pulled in behind me. No other vehicles on the road at all. Just me, sitting on that scale in the middle of the night, waiting for something to happen. I started to get a bad feeling. Not fear exactly, not yet, just a sense that something was off. The silence was too complete. Usually, even at a way station, you hear something, the hum of the lights, the distant sound of traffic, the creak of your own truck settling. But this silence was different. It was thick, heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. I turned off my engine to listen better, and the silence got worse. It pressed in on me from all sides, made my ears ring with its emptiness. Finally, I decided to get out and see what was going on. Maybe the inspector hadn't noticed me. Maybe there was some kind of equipment malfunction. Maybe they needed me to come to the window instead of waiting on the scale. I grabbed my logbook and my license, the things you're supposed to have ready for inspection, and climbed down from my cab. The moment my boots hit the pavement, the cold hit me. It was October, sure, but this cold was different. It went right through my jacket, right through my skin, settled into my bones like it had always been there. My breath came out in white clouds, and I realized I could see frost forming on the metal of my truck. That didn't make sense. The temperature had been in the low 50s when I'd started driving that evening. It shouldn't have been anywhere near freezing. I walked toward the booth, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The building looked normal enough, the same squat concrete structure I'd seen at way stations all over the region, the same government-issue windows and doors, the same faded paint. But as I got closer, I started noticing things that weren't quite right. The light above the door was flickering slightly, a pattern that seemed almost deliberate, like a signal. The glass of the booth window had a strange quality to it, a darkness that didn't match the light inside. And the figure sitting at the desk, the closer I got, the more wrong it looked. I reached the booth and stopped. The man inside was sitting perfectly still, not the stillness of someone concentrating on paperwork or watching a monitor, the stillness of a mannequin, the stillness of something that had never been alive in the first place. His hands were on the desk in front of him, frozen in a position that suggested he'd been reaching for something. His head was turned slightly toward the window, toward where trucks would pull up, but his eyes weren't focused on anything. They were just open, staring straight ahead at nothing. His skin was wrong. That's the thing I keep coming back to when I remember that night. His skin was gray, not the gray of someone who's sick, but the gray of something that had been dead for a long time. Waxy. It caught the light in a way that living skin doesn't, reflecting it back instead of absorbing it. And his uniform, I noticed it then, was old. Not worn out, just outdated. The style they'd used in the 80s and early 90s, before they updated everything in the mid-90s. I knew, because my uncle had worked for the highway department back then, and I remembered seeing pictures of him in that exact uniform. I knocked on the glass. I don't know why. Some part of me still hoped this was normal, that the man would turn and look at me and everything would make sense. But he didn't move, didn't blink, didn't acknowledge my presence in any way. He just sat there, frozen, staring at nothing with those open, empty eyes. I backed away, slowly at first, then faster as the fear started to rise in my chest. I didn't run. Some instinct told me not to run, not to make any sudden movements, but I walked back to my truck as quickly as I could without breaking into a sprint. I climbed into the cab and slammed the door and locked it, even though I knew a lock wouldn't protect me from whatever was happening. I started the engine and put the truck in gear. I didn't care about the red light anymore. I didn't care about the scale or the inspection or any of it. I just wanted to get out of there. I pulled forward, off the scale, toward the exit ramp that would take me back onto the highway. As I pulled out, I looked in my mirror. The way station was dark. Not dim, not flickering. Dark, completely dark. The lights that had been blazing moments before were off. The booth that had been glowing yellow was nothing but a black shape against the black of the night. The building sat there empty and abandoned, looking exactly the way it had looked every other time I'd passed it after hours. I didn't stop. I kept driving, faster than I should have on those winding mountain roads, not slowing down until I reached a truck stop 20 miles away. A big one, with lots of lights and other trucks and the sounds of people and life. I pulled into the lot and sat there for a long time, shaking, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Eventually, I went inside. I needed coffee. I needed to be around other people. I needed to hear human voices and remind myself that the world was still normal, that what I'd seen was just some kind of hallucination or trick of the light. I sat down at the counter and ordered a cup of coffee, and after a while, I started talking to the man next to me, an older trucker, 60 if he was a day, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of the mountains themselves. He'd been driving these routes for decades, he said, knew every mile of them. I asked him, as casually as I could, about the way station on Route 52, asked if he knew anything about it. He looked at me funny. That station's been closed for 15 years, he said. They shut it down in '02. Nobody there anymore. I felt the cold creep back into my bones. But it was lit up tonight, I said. I pulled in. There was someone in the booth. The old trucker set down his coffee cup. His face had gone pale beneath his weathered tan. You saw him, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, like he was afraid someone might overhear. A man died in that booth, he said. Back in 1989, night shift worker, doing his job, checking trucks as they came through. Had a heart attack right there at the desk. Massive. They didn't find him until the next morning. He was sitting upright in his chair, eyes open, just staring straight ahead, dead for hours. I couldn't speak. The image of that gray, waxy face was burned into my mind. They say he didn't know he was dead, the old trucker continued. Or maybe he knew and just couldn't leave. Either way, people started seeing things after that. Drivers would pull in late at night and find the lights on, find someone in the booth. They'd get out to check, and when they came back, it was all dark and empty. Some of them said the man in the booth looked wrong, like he wasn't quite alive. What happened to them? I asked. The drivers who saw him. The old trucker shrugged, but his eyes were troubled. Most of them just kept driving, tried to forget about it, but a few of them, they went back, tried to investigate, tried to figure out what was going on. He shook his head. Those ones had trouble, accidents, breakdowns in the middle of nowhere, things going wrong that shouldn't go wrong. One of them drove his truck off a cliff a month later. Another one just disappeared, left his rig at a rest stop and was never seen again. I sat there, coffee growing cold in my hands, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. My advice? The old trucker said. Forget what you saw. Don't go looking for answers. Don't drive that route after dark again. And whatever you do, don't go back to that way station. I took his advice. I changed my routes to avoid Route 52 entirely. I told my dispatcher I wouldn't run loads that took me through that part of West Virginia, and I didn't explain why. Some of them thought I was crazy. Some of them just thought I was getting old and paranoid. I didn't care what they thought. I knew what I'd seen. But I can't forget it. That's the thing. I can't get that image out of my head. The gray skin, the waxy texture, the eyes that were open but saw nothing, the uniform from a decade before I started driving, and the silence, that terrible, pressing silence that seemed to swallow everything. I still drive these mountains. It's what I do, what I've always done. But I don't drive at night anymore, not if I can help it. And when I do, when a load runs late or a schedule gets pushed back, I find myself watching for way stations, watching for lights that shouldn't be on, watching for figures in booths that should be empty, because I know he's still there. Somewhere in the dark, on that stretch of Route 52, there's a man sitting in a booth, waiting for trucks to pull in. He's been waiting since 1989. He'll probably be waiting forever. And I don't know what happens if you stay too long. I don't know what happens if you knock on that glass and he finally turns to look at you. I don't want to know. But sometimes, when the road is empty and the night is dark and the mountains rise up around me like sleeping giants, I wonder if he knows he's dead. I wonder if he's lonely, sitting there night after night with no one to talk to. I wonder if that's why the lights come on, if he's not trying to trap us, but trying to reach out, trying to find someone who can help him understand what happened. And that thought, more than anything else, is what keeps me awake at night. Not the fear, the sorrow. The idea that somewhere in the mountains of West Virginia, a man has been sitting in a booth for nearly 30 years, doing his job, waiting for his shift to end, not knowing that it ended a long time ago, and he's the only one who doesn't know it. I hope he finds peace someday. I hope whatever's keeping him there finally lets him go. But until then, I'll keep driving. I'll keep avoiding that stretch of road. And I'll keep remembering the face in the booth, the gray skin, the waxy texture, the eyes that saw nothing and praying I never see it again. Mountain fog in Appalachia isn't like fog anywhere else in the world. I've driven through fog in the lowlands of Louisiana, through coastal mist in California, through the gray haze that settles over the Great Lakes in autumn. None of it compares to what comes down from the hollows in these mountains. It doesn't drift in slowly like normal fog. It rolls. It pours down from the ridges like something alive, filling the valleys and swallowing the roads with a speed that defies nature. One moment you're driving through clear air, and the next you're blind. Visibility drops to nothing in seconds. Your headlights bounce back at you, useless. Your windshield becomes a wall of white, and you're alone in it, surrounded by something you can't see through, can't predict, can't escape until it decides to let you go. I've been driving trucks through these mountains for 16 years now, and I've learned to respect the fog. When it comes, you slow down, you pray, and you don't stop unless you absolutely have to, because out here, in the dark, in the white, stopping can be worse than crawling forward blind. What happened to me near Jellicoe, Tennessee, in the winter of 2016, is something I've never told anyone. Not my wife, not my dispatcher, not the other truckers I drink coffee with at the stops along my regular routes. I've kept it locked inside me like a splinter too deep to dig out. But it's been eating at me for years now, and I think I need to get it out before it consumes me entirely. It was late January, one of those nights when the cold comes down hard and the mountains seem to close in around you. I was hauling a load of manufactured goods from Knoxville up toward Lexington, Kentucky, a route that took me through the Cumberland Gap and up along I-75 through some of the most rugged terrain in the region. The weather report had said clear skies, no precipitation, nothing to worry about. But weather reports don't mean much in these mountains. The valleys have their own climate, their own rules, and that night, the fog came without warning. I was climbing a grade just north of Jellicoe when it hit. One moment I could see the road ahead, the guardrails on either side, the dark shapes of the mountains rising against the slightly lighter sky. The next moment, nothing. The fog poured over my truck like a wave, so thick and sudden that I thought for a moment I'd driven into a cloud. I hit the brakes instinctively, then forced myself to ease up. You can't stop suddenly on a grade like that, not pulling a full load. You'll jackknife, or you'll get rear-ended by someone who can't see you in time to stop themselves. So I slowed to a crawl, maybe 15 or 20 miles an hour, and turned on my hazard lights, and prayed no one was coming up behind me too fast. The world outside my windshield had become a wall of white. My headlights did nothing but illuminate the fog itself, making it glow like something radioactive. I couldn't see the road ahead, couldn't see the guardrails, couldn't see anything except the swirling white pressing in from all sides. The silence was oppressive. My engine rumbled, my tires hissed on the wet pavement, but beyond that, nothing. No other vehicles, no sounds from the forest. Just the fog and the cold and the terrible sense of being absolutely alone. That's when I saw the movement. It was in my side mirror, on the driver's side, a shape moving through the fog, keeping pace with my truck. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, just shadows and mist playing games with my tired eyes. But the longer I watched, the clearer it became. Something was out there, something big, moving alongside me in the fog. I tried to convince myself it was a deer. The mountains here are full of them, and they're not always afraid of vehicles. But deer don't move like that. They bound and leap. They dart away from noise and light. This thing was walking, steadily, deliberately, matching my speed exactly, even as I slowed and then sped up slightly, testing it. Whatever it was, it stayed with me. 20 miles an hour, 15, 25, always the same distance away, always half hidden in the white, and it was walking on two legs. I could see that much through the fog. The shape of it was wrong for an animal, too tall, too upright. The silhouette of broad shoulders and long limbs. It moved with a gait that wasn't quite human either, too smooth, too fluid, like something that had learned to imitate walking but hadn't gotten it quite right. Every step covered too much ground. Every movement was too deliberate, too controlled. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. My heart was hammering in my chest, and I could feel sweat breaking out on my forehead despite the cold. I told myself to keep driving, to not look, to focus on the road and the mirrors and the tiny slice of pavement I could see in front of my bumper. But I couldn't look away from that shape. It held my attention like a magnet, drawing my eyes back to the mirror again and again. Then it stopped. I watched it slow and then stand motionless at the edge of my field of vision, a tall, dark column in the swirling white. For a moment, I thought I was clear. I thought whatever it was had given up, had lost interest, had decided I wasn't worth pursuing. I kept rolling forward, not daring to speed up, not daring to slow down, just maintaining that steady crawl through the fog. Then something landed on my trailer. The impact shook my entire rig. I felt it through the frame, through the seat, through my bones. A massive thud that made the cab lurch and sent vibrations running through the metal like a struck bell. Something heavy had jumped onto the roof of my trailer. Something strong enough to make 40 tons of steel shudder on its suspension. I didn't think. I just acted. I floored the accelerator and felt my engine roar as the truck surged forward. The fog swallowed everything. I couldn't see the road, couldn't see where I was going, could only feel the pavement beneath my tires and pray I was still on it. My speedometer climbed 30, 40, 50 miles an hour, insane speeds for conditions like that, suicidal speeds. But I didn't care. I could hear something above me, movement on the roof of my trailer, scraping, scratching, the sound of claws dragging across metal. I drove blind for what felt like an eternity. The fog pressed in from all sides, and the sounds above me continued that terrible scraping, that deliberate scratching, like something was trying to tear its way through. My cab was shaking. My mirrors showed nothing but white, and somewhere behind me, on top of 30,000 pounds of cargo, something was clawing at the roof. Then suddenly, I was through. The fog ended as abruptly as it had begun. One moment I was surrounded by white, and the next I was driving through clear night air, stars visible above, the road stretching out ahead of me illuminated by my headlights. I checked my mirrors. The fog bank was behind me, a solid wall of gray that looked like it ended in a perfect line across the highway. Nothing was following me. Nothing was visible on top of my trailer. I drove for another 5 miles before I felt safe enough to stop. I pulled off at a wide spot on the shoulder, a place where the road curved around an overlook, and I sat there for a long time with my engine running and my doors locked. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My heart wouldn't slow down. Every sound made me flinch: the tick of my cooling engine, the creak of my suspension, the distant call of an owl in the trees. Finally, I made myself get out. I grabbed my flashlight and walked back to my trailer, scanning the roof as I approached. At first, everything looked normal. Same aluminum sides, same dot numbers stenciled on the back, same locks and latches I'd secured before I left Knoxville. But when I shined my light up at the roof, I saw them. Gouges. 4 of them, running parallel across the aluminum. Each one was about 3 feet long and maybe an inch deep. They cut through the metal like it was paper, leaving ragged edges and curled strips of aluminum where something had torn through. The pattern was unmistakable. Claws. 4 claws, spaced about 8 inches apart, dragged across the roof of my trailer with enough force to shred industrial aluminum. I stood there staring at those marks for a long time. My flashlight beam trembled because my hand was trembling. I thought about what could have made marks like that. Bears can tear through metal, but bears don't walk on 2 legs. Bears don't pace alongside trucks in the fog. Bears don't jump onto moving trailers and ride them through the mountains. I thought about the shape I'd seen in the mirror, the tall silhouette, the wrong gait, the way it had matched my speed exactly, like a predator sizing up its prey. And I thought about what might have happened if the fog had gone on for another mile, if my truck had stalled on that grade, if I'd been forced to stop. I got back in my cab and drove the rest of the way to Lexington without stopping. I finished my delivery, filed my paperwork, and told my dispatcher that I'd picked up some road debris that had damaged my trailer roof. He believed me. Why wouldn't he? Road debris happens all the time. A piece of metal from another vehicle, a branch from a storm, something falling off an overpass. It's not unusual. The company filed an insurance claim, the trailer was repaired, and no one asked any questions. I've never told anyone what really happened, not because I think they wouldn't believe me. Truckers believe all kinds of things about these mountains, but because I don't want to make it real by speaking it out loud. As long as I keep it inside, as long as it's just a memory, I can pretend it might have been a dream. Exhaustion, Stress. The tricks your mind plays when you're alone on a dark road and the fog closes in. But I know what I saw, I know what I heard, and I know what made those marks on my trailer. I still drive through Appalachia. It's my job, my life, the only thing I know how to do. But I check the weather obsessively now, especially in winter, especially in the mountains around Jellicoe. When the fog comes, I pull over. I find a truck stop or a wide spot or even just a safe shoulder, and I wait. I don't care how late it makes me. I don't care what my dispatcher says. Some delays are worth it, because whatever was in that fog is still out there. I feel it in my bones, the same way you feel a storm coming before you see the clouds. It's still walking those ridges, still waiting for the white to roll down from the hollows, still hunting in conditions where no one can see it coming until it's too late. I dream about it sometimes. The fog pressing in, the shape in my mirror, the sound of claws on metal. In the dreams, I'm not fast enough. In the dreams, my truck stalls on the grade, and I sit there in the white with something landing on my roof. Something heavy, something hungry. And then the clawing starts, and it doesn't stop at the roof. It keeps going, through the trailer, through the cab, until it finds me. I always wake up before I see what it is. I wake up sweating, heart pounding, reaching for a light to push back the darkness. And I lie there until dawn, listening to the sounds of the night, wondering what's out there in the mountains, wondering what walks in the fog when no one can see. I don't know what it was. I've read about the old stories, the things the mountain people used to talk about before the highways came through, the legends of creatures that don't have names in any modern language. Maybe it was one of those. Maybe it was something else, something that doesn't fit into any category. All I know is that it was real. The gouges in my trailer were real. The weight on my roof was real. And the feeling of being hunted, of being prey, of barely escaping something terrible that was as real as anything I've ever experienced. Whatever it was, it's still out there. And if you ever find yourself driving through the mountains near Jellicoe, Tennessee, on a night when the fog comes rolling down, take my advice. Don't slow down. Don't stop. Don't look in your mirrors too long. Just keep moving, as fast as you safely can, until you break out of the white. Because something walks in that fog, something that doesn't belong to our world. And if it catches you, if your truck breaks down, if you're forced to stop, if the fog holds on just a little too long, I don't think you'll ever break out of it at all. Every trucker monitors Channel 19. That's the universal rule, the one thing all of us agree on, regardless of company or cargo or how many years we've been running these roads. Channel 19 is where the community lives. It's where you hear about accidents up ahead, weather rolling in, speed traps waiting around the next curve. It's where drivers call out hazards and share information that keeps each other safe. In a profession that's defined by isolation, hours and hours alone in a cab with nothing but the road and your thoughts, Channel 19 is the thread that connects us all, the reminder that we're not as alone as we sometimes feel. I've been monitoring that channel for 22 years now. I've heard just about everything you can hear on it. Warnings about jackknife trailers, calls for help from drivers whose rigs broke down in the middle of nowhere, arguments that got heated and personal, jokes that kept us laughing through long nights. Ghost stories passed between truckers who'd seen things they couldn't explain. But nothing I'd ever heard prepared me for what came through my radio at 4 in the morning on a lonely stretch of I-64 West Virginia. It was March of 2018, deep into the kind of night that feels endless. I was running a load of machinery parts from Virginia up to Ohio, a route that took me through the mountains of southern West Virginia. The highway was empty at that hour. I'd passed maybe 3 vehicles in the last 2 hours, and the darkness outside my windows was absolute. No moon, no stars, just the black shapes of mountains rising on either side of the road and the twin cones of my headlights cutting through the void ahead. I was tired, but not dangerously so. I'd stopped for coffee about an hour earlier and felt alert enough to push through to my destination. The radio was on, tuned to Channel 19 like always, but no one was talking. Just the occasional crackle of static, the sound of an open channel with no voices on it. It was peaceful in a way, just me and the road and the quiet hum of my engine. Then the voice came through. It was a man's voice, calm and clear, cutting through the static, with a precision that made me sit up straighter in my seat. There was no preamble, no greeting, no handle or call sign, just the message, delivered like a statement of fact. Driver at mile marker 142. Do not stop. Keep driving. Do not look to your right. I felt a chill run down my spine. The voice was so specific, so direct. Mile marker 142. I reached for my GPS and checked my position. I was at mile marker 141, less than a mile from wherever this voice was talking about. Less than a minute at my current speed. I keyed my mic. Hello? Who is this? What's at mile marker 142? No response, just static. I tried again. This is Big Bear. I just heard your transmission about mile marker 142. What's the situation? Over. Nothing. The channel was silent except for that low, constant hiss of dead air. I told myself it was probably a prank. Some bored driver messing around, trying to spook people in the middle of the night. It happens. Long hours on the road can make people do strange things to stay entertained, but something about that voice didn't fit. It wasn't playful or mocking. It wasn't the voice of someone trying to scare me for a laugh. It was serious, urgent, almost. Like whoever was speaking genuinely wanted me to hear and obey. The mile markers ticked by. 141.2, 141.4, 141.6. I gripped the steering wheel and kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead. The trees pressed in close on both sides of the highway here, the forest dark and dense beyond the reach of my headlights. There were no other vehicles in sight, no lights anywhere except my own. Just me, hurtling through the darkness, toward whatever was waiting at mile marker 142. I saw the sign approaching, green reflective numbers against a dark background, 142. My foot hovered over the brake out of instinct, some part of my brain wanting to slow down, to investigate, to understand what was happening. But I remembered the voice. Do not stop. Keep driving. Do not look to your right. As I passed the marker, I felt it. It's hard to describe the sensation. A pull, almost magnetic, drawing my attention toward the right side of the road. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to turn my head, to look, to see what was there. The urge was overwhelming, stronger than curiosity, stronger than fear. It felt like something was calling to me, demanding my attention with a force that was almost physical. My neck muscles twitched. My eyes wanted to slide to the right on their own, pulled by something I couldn't explain. But I didn't look. I kept my eyes locked on the road ahead, staring at the center line like my life depended on it. My hands ached from gripping the wheel. My jaw was clenched so tight my teeth hurt. I drove past mile marker 142 without looking, without stopping, without giving in to the pull that wanted me to turn my head. In my peripheral vision, I caught something. A shape at the edge of the road, just beyond the guardrail. Something pale, something large, something standing upright in a way that didn't match any animal I knew. It was there for only a second, a blur of white against the dark trees, and then it was behind me, and I was past it, and I didn't look back. My CB crackled. The same voice, the same calm and clear tone. Good, you listened. Most don't. Then silence. I drove for another 10 miles before I trusted myself to speak. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. I keyed the mic with trembling fingers. Hello, is anyone there? Who was that? Over. No response. I switched channels, trying different frequencies, calling out to anyone who might be listening. A few voices came back, other drivers, confused by my questions, telling me they hadn't heard anything unusual on 19. No warnings about mile marker 142. No calm voice telling anyone not to stop. You okay, driver? One of them asked. You sound spooked. I didn't know how to answer. I said I was fine, just tired, just thought I heard something weird. I got off the channel and drove in silence for a while, trying to process what had just happened. I didn't stop again until I reached a truck stop near Charleston, well after sunrise. I sat in my cab for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, replaying the events of the night in my head. The voice, the warning, the pull at mile marker 142, the pale shape in my peripheral vision that I refused to look at directly, the second transmission, acknowledging that I'd listened. Most don't. That's what the voice had said. Most don't listen, which meant most drivers did look. Most drivers did stop, and something happened to them when they did. I asked around at the truck stop. Subtle questions, the kind you ask when you don't want people to think you've lost your mind. Had anyone heard any strange stories about I-64 inches West Virginia? Any legends about that stretch of highway? Any reports of accidents or disappearances near mile marker 142? Most people shrugged me off. A few looked at me funny. But one old-timer, a driver who'd been running these roads since before I was born, got real quiet when I mentioned the mile marker. "You saw something out there," he said. It wasn't a question. "I don't know what I saw," I told him. "I didn't look. Someone on the radio told me not to." He nodded slowly, like that made perfect sense to him. "You're lucky you listened." "What's out there?" I asked. "At mile marker 142. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. "I don't know exactly. Nobody does. But there's been stories about that stretch for years. Drivers who stopped at night and were never seen again. Others who looked when they shouldn't have and drove off the road into the ravine. A few who made it through but wouldn't talk about what they saw. All of them said the same thing. They felt something pulling at them, trying to get them to look, trying to get them to stop." "And the voice on the radio?" He shook his head. "I've heard about that too. A warning that comes through sometimes, tells you not to stop, not to look. Nobody knows who sends it. Could be another driver who knows what's out there. Could be something else." He paused. "Could be someone who didn't listen once and is trying to make sure others don't make the same mistake." I didn't ask what he meant by that. I didn't want to know. I finished my delivery in Ohio and headed home. I took a different route back, adding 2 hours to my trip to avoid that stretch of I-64. It's what I do now, every time. I plan my loads so I don't have to drive through there at night. And when I can't avoid it, when the schedule forces me through those mountains after dark, I monitor channel 19 more closely than ever. I listen for that voice. I watch the mile markers like they're counting down to something terrible. I've never heard the voice again, but I think about it constantly. I think about how specific it was, the mile marker, the instruction, the acknowledgement afterward. Someone or something knew I was approaching that spot, knew what was waiting there, knew that I needed to be warned. And I think about what would have happened if I hadn't listened, if I'd given in to that pull and turned my head, if I'd seen whatever was standing at the edge of the road, pale and large and waiting. I don't think I would have made it to that truck stop in Charleston. I don't think anyone would have ever seen me again. I'd have become another story, another disappearance, another driver who stopped when he shouldn't have and vanished into the West Virginia night. I still don't know who saved me that night. I've asked other truckers, searched online forums, even contacted the highway patrol to see if there were any reports of incidents at that location. Nothing. No answers. Just more questions and the persistent, uncomfortable feeling that I was part of something I don't understand. Sometimes I wonder if the voice was human at all. Maybe it was another driver who knew the dangers and was watching out for his fellow truckers. Maybe it was someone who'd lost a friend or a family member on that stretch of road and wanted to prevent it from happening again. Or maybe it was something else entirely. Something that exists in the spaces between what we understand and what we fear. Something that watched over that spot on the highway and chose, for whatever reason, to protect me. I'll never know, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to. What I do know is this. There are places in Appalachia where the rules are different, where things happen that can't be explained by logic or science, where voices come through the radio with warnings you'd better heed. I've driven through fog that wasn't natural. I've seen lights in the mountains that had no source. I've felt the weight of something watching me from the trees, and I've learned to trust the signs, even when they don't make sense. If you ever find yourself on I-64 inches West Virginia late at night, approaching mile marker 142, and a voice comes through your radio telling you not to stop, listen. Don't question it. Don't try to understand. Just keep your eyes forward, your hands on the wheel, and your foot on the gas. Drive past whatever's waiting there without looking, without stopping, without giving in to the pull that wants you to turn your head. Because most drivers don't listen. That's what the voice said. Most don't. And I don't want to think about what happens to them.